"Here's the movie camera," said Preston to his boss, ready for a day's work. The two men left quickly, but nobody saw them. "We're taking in a lot of water," Hayes shouted suddenly. The sailors worked quickly, but they didn't have much time. They had to get the water out of the ship. "Come quick!" Jimmy shouted to Englehorn. Englehorn and Hayes quickly followed Jimmy up the stairs and looked. 4 sailors were in a small boat with Carl, Jack, Preston, Anne, Bruce, Herb, and Mike, the sound man. "They're going to the island," said Jimmy. "Do you want me to bring them back?" Hayes asked. "No, we're leaving here as quickly as we can," Englehorn said angrily. He never liked Denham, but now he hated him. On the small beach at Skull Island, Carl was as excited as a little boy, but the other visitors weren't. Anne took Jack's hand and looked up at the old ruins and the large statues in the rocks. From high above, the statues' angry faces looked down on them. "They don't want visitors here," Jack thought. Carl, Herb, and Mike got the cameras and lights ready. "Okay, Herb, film the statues. Anne, you're afraid. Bruce, put your arm around her. Anne, look up at these statues and then scream," Carl said. Anne's eyes opened wide, and she screamed loudly and wildly. When she stopped screaming, something on the island, maybe a strange animal, roared loudly. Hayes and Englehorn heard it. They turned quickly and saw hundreds of birds. The birds flew up into the sky, away from the island. "What was that?" Bruce asked. Nobody answered. "Herb, bring the camera. Follow me," said Carl. They climbed quickly up some stairs in the rocks. "Where are you going? Is this a good idea?" Bruce asked, afraid. 2 sailors waited in the small boat, and the other people followed Carl. Anne was last. Jack looked back at her and said, "Anne?" "I want to go back to the ship," she said. She spoke quickly. But Carl shouted, "Come here, everybody! Look!" He was very happy. This strange place was full of old ruins and statues, and it was the only place in the world for Carl's new and best movie. He knew it. "Anne, stand over there." "Ready, Herb?" he said. After Herb stopped filming, everybody followed Carl. They went across a very old bridge and saw the skulls of maybe 100 or 200 people on the ground. They climbed up over some more rocks and looked down. There were a lot of very old ruins and some small old houses. "Nobody lives here now." "It's a ruin," said Carl. "Look! More stairs over there go to that large door in the wall. Wait! Look! There's a little girl down there." Slowly and carefully, he walked down to the child. She was very dirty, with strange, wild eyes. "Here's some candy," Carl said. He took some chocolate from his jacket, but when he tried to give it to her, he felt her teeth in his finger. Then she ran away. Suddenly, there were more people, young and old. Slowly they came out from behind rocks. They had strange clothes and wild eyes. Carl called for everybody with him. They, too, went down and saw the islanders. "They won't hurt us," said Carl. Without a sound, Mike, the sound man, fell face down on the ground. There was a very long knife in his back. He was dead. Anne screamed. Quickly, Jack and Carl turned and looked for the killer. Suddenly, the wild animal roared again, but this time louder and more angrily. Everybody was afraid. Then wild men jumped out at them and pulled them with their strong hands. An old woman with long white hair looked angrily into Anne's eyes. Anne felt cold and afraid. The sky got darker, and a heavy rain began to fall. The islanders shouted angrily in their strange language. A fight began when some men pushed one of the sailors onto the ground. They hit him many times over the head with some wood. He died quickly. More men pushed and kicked Carl. Some people pulled Anne out of Jack's arms, and he tried to get her back. But somebody hit him on the head, and he fell. Was he dead, too? Anne screamed loudly and wildly. Everybody turned, afraid, their eyes on the wall. Suddenly, the sound of a gun changed everything. The islanders ran away, back to their houses. Englehorn walked over to Carl and pulled him up onto his feet. "Are you ready now?" he asked angrily. "Can we go?" Chapter 3. The Wall. "What's happened to Anne?" he thought wildly. "Did the islanders get on the ship? Do they have her?" "The ship is too heavy. Throw tables, boxes, everything into the ocean," Englehorn shouted. Everybody was back on the ship now, but they couldn't get it off the rocks. Sailors carried things out of Lumpy's kitchen and threw them into the water. Englehorn saw Lumpy's sad eyes, but he had to save his men and his ship. The water was higher now, so maybe it was possible. But the ship moved wildly up and down. It was a black night. Nobody saw the islander when he jumped from the island's highest rocks. Everybody on the ship was too busy. His feet hit the floor of the ship without a sound, and he moved quickly. In her room, Anne didn't want to think about Skull Island or Mike, now dead. In her head, she could hear the loud roar of that strange animal in the jungle. What was it? She thought. Jack wasn't dead. She was happy about that. He'll be okay, she hoped. Jack woke up in his room. Slowly he remembered Skull Island, Mike, and the wild islanders. Then he remembered Anne. When she screamed, something in the jungle roared back. What was it? Anne! He had to find her. He got up slowly and tried to walk. His head hurt really badly, and the ship moved quickly up and down, right and left. But he had to find Anne. When he got to her room, the door was wide open. A lot of her things were on the floor, but there was no Anne. Jack felt sick. What's happened to Anne? He thought wildly. Did the islanders get on the ship? Do they have her? Herb and Preston sat in Carl's room, but Carl couldn't sit quietly. We got away. We have to be happy about that, Carl said. But Mike didn't get away, Preston said sadly. Mike worked hard for me, and he loved his job. I'm going to finish this movie for Mike. We'll give the money to his family. Yes, good. We'll do that, Herb said. 2 sailors came to Carl's door. We have to throw your bed, table, and more heavy things into the ocean. Everything goes, they said. Take it away, boys, said Carl. The men carried a lot of things out of Carl's room. We got some great film there, Herb said. We filmed Skull Island, Carl answered with a smile. It was dangerous, but now we can finish filming Anne and Bruce in a safe place. He looked around his room. Something isn't right, he thought. Where's my camera? He shouted. Then he jumped up and ran out. One of the sailors started to throw Carl's camera into the ocean. Carl shouted, No! Not that! Stop! He jumped and quickly took the camera from the sailor's hands. Throw that camera in the water, Englehorn shouted at Carl. No more filming. Men are dead because you want to make a movie. Don't come near me or my camera, Carl shouted angrily. Englehorn hit Carl in the face, and he fell. The camera flew across the floor. Suddenly, the ocean pushed the front of the ship up high, and Englehorn fell. Carl jumped up and saved his camera. There was a long, loud noise from the bottom of the ship, and then, away from the rocks, they were free. Jack ran down some stairs. At the bottom, he found a dead man on the floor, but he couldn't stop. He had to find Anne before it was too late. He looked around wildly. Which way did they go? At the same time, Hayes carefully turned the ship around and sailed out into the ocean. The men shouted happily. Now they could go home. We're free now, Englehorn thought. You did that very well, he said to Hayes. Then he turned and saw Jack. Stop! Jack shouted. We have to turn back. It's Anne. She's not on the ship. Englehorn's eyes turned to the island. Those people have other plans for us, he said. A lot of water went into Anne's mouth and hurt her eyes. The man had one arm around her and a rope in his other hand. Other men stood on the island with the other end of the rope and pulled them out of the water. They had her now. Anne was very weak, and she couldn't scream. Hayes looked at the men's faces. Every sailor on the ship liked Anne and wanted to get her back safely. He looked at Englehorn. Englehorn thought carefully for a minute. Then he shouted, "Get ready, men! We're going back!" They quickly put 2 small boats into the water and threw guns into them. Carl and Jack helped. Jack saw fires on the top of the great wall. They shone in the dark night sky, and there was a lot of smoke. "Will they kill her in those fires?" he thought. The 2 small boats went out onto the ocean with Carl, Preston, Bruce, Herb, Jack, Englehorn, and 20 sailors. Hayes and Lumpy got another boat ready. "We don't have much time," Hayes thought. In the dark, the islanders pushed Anne to the wall. The heavy rain didn't put out the fires on the top of it. Some old people cried, afraid of the animal behind the wall. They shouted angrily at Anne in their strange language. They repeated one word many times, "Kong." But what did it mean? "The men will come. They'll save me," Anne thought. But she was very afraid. These wild people were afraid too. She could see it in their eyes. There was something over that wall, and it was very dangerous. They were safe only because the wall was between them and it. An old woman with wild red eyes stood in front of Anne now. She talked fast and crazily. The men pushed Anne to the ground, and the old woman jumped at her. She threw something from a bottle into Anne's face. Anne understood. "They're going to give me to that thing over the wall," she thought. "They'll live and I'll die. For them." They took her to the bridge at the top of the wall and put ropes around her arms and legs. Anne tried to get free of the ropes, but she couldn't. Men brought more fire, and for the first time she could see below her. Across a wide ravine at the bottom of the wall, there was a bed of rocks. The dark jungle behind it looked very dangerous. The islanders cried and screamed loudly. Suddenly, the ropes moved, and Anne went down into the ravine. On the bed of rocks, Anne saw fire all around her. She could see faces of statues in the hot light of the fire. Was this their theater? And was she the actor? Then there was smoke all around her, and she couldn't see. She felt very weak, and everything hurt. The islanders stopped shouting. Through the smoke, Anne saw something very big and dark. It jumped quickly through the trees.